Welcome, everyone, to another podcast. Today we have a special guest, Matthew Carauddo, or you might call him Diamond Dragons, a bunch of books that he's written behind him, as you see. He's a multifaceted artist with a remarkable career spanning acting, writing, directing, voiceover, sound design, and martial arts. Not only do we know you're a licensed fencing instructor, but you also taught countless students and earned over a dozen medals in competitive saber fencing.
It's a long story. I was teaching as a very low level basic and mostly learning from a maestro, which just means master, at an academy of fencing in the San Jose, San Francisco Bay Area. And what I had first began with is I was just taking classes there. And I don't want to go on a big diatribe here because I know you're introducing me, but I'll be quick about it. I was just taking classes. Then I was there pretty often. Finally, the maestro of the academy just comes up to me and says, you're really good with kids and everybody likes you here and da-da. And he's just going on and on. He says, did you ever consider, teaching? And I'm like, no, never, not fencing, certainly not. But, I have a background in theater and performance and blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, you should consider it because, I'd be interested in, he kind of talked it up. And I said, well, okay, maestro, I'll do that. And so long story short, again, I'm, fast forwarding, I went slowly down that rabbit hole and, kept going for it and whatnot. And so there you go. But that was decades ago.
Your passion for performance shines through in your stage work, including roles in The Hobbit.
Yeah, I was able to portray Bilbo Baggins in a stage performance and production of The Hobbit. And that came in, I want to say it was the year 2000. So it was really just after Peter Jackson had released, I believe, just the first film, or it was sort of coinciding with it, if I recall properly. But again, that was 24 plus years ago. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. That production was really fantastic. Our costumer was brilliant and the set designs were fantastic, given the fact that, as you can imagine, for theatrical performances, especially when they're not super high level, because this wasn't a professional, super, what do you want to call it, Broadway production or whatnot, limited budgets, to work off of. But it was a lot of fun. And as far as I recall, it was the only theatrical production that was officially accepted by the Tolkien estate. And again, I'm doing 24 plus years of memory here, so I might be wrong, but I feel like that was something that occurred back in the day.
But you also have this innovative choreography for Star Wars inspired live saber combat shows through your Balance of Power series.
The live productions I used to do somewhere around 2004, just before, I want to say at the time it was the newest Star Wars film in a while, right? 2005, it was Revenge of the Sith was coming out, and of course we had already had in 1999 the Phantom Menace, and then later, I don't remember the year, I want to say it was 2002 or 3, something like that, there was Attack of the Clones. But then finally Revenge of the Sith was coming, and everybody kind of knew, aha, this is it. George Lucas said there will be no more films after this. Now remember, this is back in the day, so just don't worry about the present time right now. We're talking about 2004 and 5. And so, I don't know, it was just sort of on my mind, and I was fencing, I was competing, I was doing my things, playing some games too, video games, There were some Star Wars video games like Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, Dark Forces, whatever. There were a lot of fun, video games. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen a live Star Wars style production. Long story short, I kind of decided, okay, I'm going to find out. I want to see if this is even possible. And at that time, again, understand that we're going way back here, obviously, minus 20 years. It was pretty difficult to have a very bright, glowing saber and not have it immediately be destroyed if you collided it with another one on stage. Most of them were very fragile. Either that or they were very dim. And LEDs were just getting to this position where they could be super bright, these individual LEDs. So again, long story short, I kind of happened to start poking my nose into that at about the right time. Technology was just about to peek through to a point where they would be plausible on stage and not just kind of a laughing joke like, oh, look, a barely dim, barely visible lightsaber, and you had to be in the complete darkness to even barely see it. They were significantly bright. And now, fast forward into the present time here, 2020s and all this kind of stuff. There's just a whole industry, all these underground industries, which is sort of where I got involved by meeting these different folks, sort of the underground saber community, if you will. And there were these small electronic lightsaber boards that
Wow.
not only powered the LEDs, but drove the sound and all this stuff that we would install in the lightsaber props. And, you got to fit all this damn electronics and wires and solder it all together, get that stuff in there, put a speaker in there, switches. It was kind of funny. It was kind of like having, 15 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag to fit all these electronics. Now, of course, here we are, 2025 and all this kind of stuff. But now electronics, of course, you can fit even more in smaller packages, all this stuff.
Like, how did your training shape your early career?
In 2018, I kind of began with the screenplay version of the very first one. And then only in 2021, I published the first Diamond Dragons book, which is right there behind me. Kind of hard to see, but that's the that's the actual first of the series. I have definitely been blessed in the way of not to keep quoting Lewis Carroll, but following many rabbit holes and going down them, and they were unique, creative rabbit holes. You would be hard pressed to meet another fencer, not because I'm like, oh, I'm the only one, but it's not that common of a thing to run into.
How did your competitive fencing experience, including winning 12 medals, influence your approach to
winning medals? Wasn't really my intention, in the sense that I'm like, oh, I got to win golds and silvers and bronzes.
Yeah.
I did, but the point was to train very hard, have a lot of fun in the doing. And then for me, the tournaments were really fun because you're amongst friends and folks and of different styles and stuff. I'd be like, hey, Rowan, what's up, dude? How you been? How's the girlfriend situation? He's like, oh, dude, it's going, this stuff. And I'm like, I'm gonna get you, and he's like, no, dude, you not this year. And I'm like, oh, what's this now? It's throwing some slack. He's like, dude, you've been slacking, man. I've been seeing some of your bouts. I'm like, okay. We would just do that. And then we would fence. And then, sometimes they win. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you're going to win against a different opponent because they don't have the same level of experience. And then more often than not, let me be honest with you, Chris, part of the way that you end up scoring medals is, part of my French, you get your ass handed to you most of the time. You want to fence against people who are better than you, which I often did in the training. Most everybody was better than me for the most part. I mean, for the 12 plus medals I got, there were plenty of tournaments where, I didn't place top 3. So it's fine. I placed 5th or 7th or whatever. But in terms of like Diamond Dragons, it allowed me, not only the fencing allowed me to bring a certain level of like realism to the fight work, but because of the martial arts and whatnot, I applied a lot of it. Like the dragons have wings, obviously, so they can use those to swat and slap at their opponents. We have it where their tail is literally like a giant mace on a chain, where they can just go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's like, ooh, that's snazzy. Their jaws, their claws. And I have it where they're kind of sometimes performing aerobatic, if not acrobatic, moves in the air to do a flipping, twirling twist action, So they're not always, for example, spitting flames and ice and electricity and poison or whatever. They get caught in these clutches like a melee, battle. So you might think of it like, ooh, now they have to do these kind of martial, claws, and they're like, slash.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, can you imagine what this would look like? And I'm like, I kind of do my best throughout the books to describe some of these situations, but then not go so much in detail where you get weighed down by it. You just learn. You're like, oh man, these guys came to fight. Like there's, when the fights happen, there's some serious going down,
Okay.
The work speaks for itself, and I feel that way about my own. Is if people visit the website diamond-dragons.com and they start poking around and they're watching some of the videos and they're looking at some of the chapter artwork teaser videos which I've made. And there are, by the way, as of the moment of this broadcast, 350 plus non-AI color illustrations, well, at least in the hardcover versions, that I'm proud to say I worked on almost all of those. I hired some artists to help me out with different things and whatnot. I always like bringing aboard other folks or whatever, but I had to do the bulk of these things myself. And just the cover designs, as you can see here in the background, and the video editing, the voiceover work. It's really more than just a series of books. It's really a universe that I'm trying to unfold to people slowly but surely. And
It's amazing what you've done there.
oh, thank you. It took time, and also I think this is the culmination of the fact that I have been involved in this upwards of 30 plus years and whatnot, acting and singing and sound design, fight choreography, directing projects, building electronic LED saber props that make sound, suiting up as Darth Vader, in a full costume with sound and craziness and sabers, doing fight work live and all this insanity. I mean, it's kind of that was a long day.
Yeah, it's wonderful what you've done there, though. Like, what was the initial spark for creating the Diamond Dragon saga? Like, how did it evolve from screenplay to book series?
That's a good question. So first of all, I think we all love the idea of dragons in general. I suppose everybody's different. Maybe some people would say, "Oh, I don't like fantasy at all. I only like movies that are about humans." I'm like, that's fine. But those people aside, I'm not trying to denigrate anybody. I'm just saying is, for me, even when I was very young, I was like, man, I love all this cool fantasy stuff. It's just so cool to be that imaginative. And reading Lord of the Rings was awesome. Playing some video games, which, by the way, I incorporated a lot of shout outs and little hidden Easter eggs and subtle homages to all sorts of things. Not only Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but I included a few from Peter Jackson's films, little homages. Hard to explain, won't go into all the details, but like also from video games that I liked when I was a child, from a little well-known series called Ultima, which was made by a company called Origin Systems, and that was Richard Garriott and Star Long, if I'm not mistaken. And anyway, there was also another series called Might and Magic, which later became Heroes of Might and Magic. But all these things I kind of would draw inspiration from. But dragons were always these kinds of mythical creatures that, if you check and you do your historical research, they're present in almost every society, So it's not like American dragons only, or Japanese dragons, or Chinese dragons only. It's like every society has some kind of weird flying lizard motif going on in their books and whatnot, in their records. And so they've always carried this kind of cool mystique and also a level of intelligence that doesn't normally come with a lot of other creature types, you know. So I kind of always went around that. I was like, if I'm going to do this, this is, before I even started writing the screenplay, I'm like, I want them to be intelligent. I want them to basically be, the Lord of the Rings type characters, but as dragons. And that's exactly what we get. We get this wonderful hero's journey, a very Joe Campbell-esque hero's journey, if you will. And for people who aren't familiar with Joseph Campbell in general, and how his importance has affected modern day cinema and whatnot, he essentially wrote the book on literally called The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. And then he also wrote another book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, which actually predated the Hero's Journey book that he wrote. I want to say he wrote The Hero's Journey in the 90s, and The Hero of a Thousand Faces is like 60s, 70s, I don't know. But anyway, there's always that young blank slate, right? That's our Luke, that's our Frodo, that's our Harry Potter, that's our Neo from the Matrix. I mean, you name the hero's journeys, but those are four, or whatnot. And you always have that wise wizard, right? You have the Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have the Gandalf, you have Morpheus, and so on. Even what was it? The Hunger Games. Katniss had Haymitch, I think, who was played by Woody Harrelson. Brilliant actor.
Yeah, and I
So
always thought that my favorite Shakespearean play, Merchant of Venice, had the guy Shylock. I always thought that Shylock was like a wizard type, godlike figure, but it was just a guy named Shylock.
there you go. And I mean, now you're thinking with portals. Exactly, Chris. Like we have all these things that have predated even Shakespeare. I mean, let's just bring it up. I'll just say the word Beowulf. I mean,
Hmm.
you don't get any older in a way than that. But that's the one of the oldest medieval heroes' journeys. You got Grendel. What the hell is a Grendel? And you're like, it's a friggin' monster, man. Rawr, gonna kill you, gonna eat everybody in the village. And you got Beowulf. And you can imagine, you're like, well, I wonder what Beowulf was like. I'm like, it was probably gonna be like Arnold Schwarzenegger, big old huge base. I'm gonna beat you down. Grendel, I'm gonna find you. Then I'm gonna rip out your spine. Right? And that's the idea that some people often don't get, that they're seeing the same story. And I don't want to make that sound bad, by the way. The same story told many creative and different ways over and over again. And by the way, when I say it's the same story, I do not mean that it's a bad thing. It's like if I said, hey, Star Wars and Harry Potter are the same, and Harry Potter is the same as Lord of the Rings, and so on, some people will get angry. And I'd be like, I don't mean it that way. I mean that the skeletal structure is very similar, if not the same, in the sense of the character archetypes. Again, like I said, the blank slate hero, the wise wizard, the companions that go along with him or her, whatever, this kind of stuff like that. The grizzled old curmudgeon who's always like, you're not good enough. There's always that guy who's in, you suck. Every single thing, you guys suck. Oh, you're never gonna make it. Then finally, the hero does something really good, and they're like, all right, pretty good. It's always like that. And I've placed all of those characters in mind, but then also developed them in my own way. And again, I'm proud to say that I've done all this homework ahead of time so that I can do these things with competence. Not only that, but like I'm surprised at where my characters have taken me. I learn sometimes what they're going to do. They tell me things while I'm sitting there working on something, and then suddenly I'll be like, oh, that's a really good idea. What the hell? Right. Jackie should request this. Oh my God. Oh, what about and oh wait, this character should save that one, not the other one, which I first had in mind. It should be this one flies in and saves the day. Oh, that's spicy. I love it. So these kinds of things, these epiphanies will they will surprise me too, But I do tend to outline as much as possible. Again, in a very skeletal structure, and I feel that's important when it comes to not only storytelling, but like when you just think of making basic projects. Like how many people are going to build a building without a schematic and a materials list and the
Yeah.
labor involved that you need, your time scale, like when are we going to build it, how are we going to build it, I tell you what to do, I tell you how to do it, I tell you when to do it. I mean, you're going to need some of those tools if you want to finish your work, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. One book every year thus far, and I've hit all my deadlines.
Yeah.
2021 1, 2022 book 2, 2023 book, and so on.
Yeah, I'm starting to write a series. It's about a girl named Maya. She's an android, and she's got a pet squirrel. And I'm just trying to figure out what to do with her. Like I have all these ideas about time travel, or I think the thing is she has an iPhone and it's an app that opens up portals to parallel universes, and she ends up meeting an evil version of herself and a city known as Iron Spire, and an evil enemy. And I'm not really much into fantasy like you would, but I like the idea of science fiction and androids and like Detroit Become Human, my favorite game, right?
I remember that game. I liked it quite a bit. I thought that was pretty exemplary writing. Kind of reminded me a little bit in the same stylistic choice and kind of mood as Heavy Rain. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
this one.
yeah, I remember Heavy Rain. I like that one too.
Yeah.
How do you manage the creative process of writing, illustrating, and composing music for Diamond Dragons simultaneously?
That's a good question too. I will just say this. So first of all, I'm not totally the composer of all the music, but it's true that I often will That's hard to explain. I'll record my own vocals and do several layers of those, and then I can send these to some of my composers to say, I want to do something like this. And so, like the main Diamond Dragons theme, I'm the one who came up with the kind of 12 bar, um, four chord kind of um, mood and kind of feel that is. Um, and then from there, I have also created all these variations, record them, send them off to these composers. And in other times, I just license certain pieces of music. Not always. In fact, I try to make it clear when it's like, no, this is original Diamond Dragons music. And then other ones are like, oh, this beautiful piece by 12 Titans, for example, or another composer who I'm really fond of his work, David Chappelle, not to be confused with Dave Chappelle, the comedian,
I
but David
know.
Chappelle is like in the UK, very excellent music. But I
Yep.
mean, going back to what you're saying about like, the process. Yeah, I have to allocate the time. I have to schedule it out. So I'm on it pretty much full time, Chris. I work basically 9 to 6, ish.
Wow.
And of course, that doesn't mean straight. I obviously take my a lunch break. I breathe, get up, do these things. But it's required. The discipline is required. And the only way that I can advocate for such things is this is the only way that I can hit my numbers, which I've been tracking. I wrote 25,000 words this last month. I tracked every single day. I mean, it's 1K today, 1,300, 2,000. What? Finally, it adds up. Sometimes I don't hit those numbers, but once you've done enough tracking of your own numbers, and that includes whether you did an illustration, whether you did some editing, whether you did some formatting, you worked on your covers, you're going to do some video editing, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, if you're tracking it, eventually you're going to have an idea of your averages. You're going to know if you're like, I wrote 0 words this month. You know how I know that? I don't have any records at all. In fact, I know because I didn't write anything. That's one way to track your numbers, right? Write it down. It's not hard either. I just go in and put date and then go plus 1,000 or whatever the hell the number is. Sometimes it's plus 300. It's not I don't even call it a good day, a bad day. I'm like, well, that's what happened today. Um, we all get busy, right, Chris? Like you said yourself, somebody we get sick. You got to go to the dentist. You got to meet your sister-in-law. Whatever is happening, and in some cases, I'm so focused on like an illustration. Like an illustration can take me 6 hours or more. I don't know. It depends. There's some where I've literally been working on one over like I work a lot on one day. I'm like, okay, enough of it. Oh my god, I'm done with it for today. Then that's it. That's all I did that day. But I'm not even done with it because it's so complicated. Like maybe it has 28 layers to it. Like I'll give an example. I did a kind of a war scene where you see the main castle, which I can't really show here with my hands, but it's in the sort of in the background, but then there's just a bunch of flying around arrows and fireballs and ice and this evil dragon and this one way in the distance, and you see a bunch of eyes and just like it's just a flood of bullets and a flood of evil dudes. Like this takes sometimes many layers. You're not just going to go blah, 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 done. you know so and then there's other ones where I'm like, oh, I want to show the scepter of Senate, which is an artifact. So that one's not as hard, but then there's the details of crafting the scepter itself. But at least it's just basically one object instead of 84 of them or whatever. So right, Chris, it really depends. And then there's some that I just can't do myself, and that's usually where I'm like going to my illustrators and hey, I got an idea. I wanted to try this. Da, 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 da. What do you think? And here's some idea. This. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's quite a process in all of it, but it just requires the discipline to just make the notes. Keep
Yeah.
track of things. Make sure that I know when I've gone over certain chapters more than one time. Like I kind of keep my tabs. I'm like, okay, I've been over that chapter a lot. I don't probably need to revisit it for
Yeah.
formatting and for more developmental editing. But then there's other ones where I know because I just wrote it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to go over that one a lot. Like, I only wrote it once, so it's in its complete rough draft form. But then there's other times where I can, go back, I'll scan a chapter and I'll be like, okay, so wait, I've been over this. Oh, I've been over this 3 times. Okay, cool. Then I'll scan it and I might be like, it's fine. It's fine. So there's like those kind of levels. That's what I do, Chris, because and again, this will be different for every writer out there or whatever, I do all of my own work. I don't have the funds to magically hire developmental editors, line editors, copy editors, proofreading, this thing and that. Like, what am I? What do I look like? Warren Buffett? You know, I'm not a multi-million-dollar man.
I was reading somewhere that you use 12 to 16 note in a 4-chord theme you created. Can you explain the significance that you use this for Diamond Dragons and how it ties into the story?
So it's more about like music theory at that point. And I took a long time. This is way early in the game. This is like going all the way back to 2017 when I was about to start working with my composer, where I was like, hey, and his name is, it's a little tough. It's Amon
Mm.
Sepala. But Amon, and he's one of, at this point, many, but at the time he was just my only composer. And I said, hey, Amon, I have, this kind of piece that I want to send you. It's really just 4 chords, essentially 12 notes, so to speak, or whatever. Let me know if you smell and feel like why I want to do this as the main theme. And this can be heard also in my videos. He's composed some pieces that actually went around it, which was again by design. And then what I wanted to do is make sure that that kind of progression of notes was then present in almost, not all, but almost all of the other pieces I was going to have created. And that's something that, like, people may or may not notice these kinds of things, but like John Williams does that often. There'll be pieces of Luke's theme obviously embedded in other pieces of music for obvious reasons. And there's the kind of possibility for, of course, doing the morose versions of certain things, and then even the more triumphant versions, or the more like it's battle time kind of versions. So like, this is just kind of how I work, Chris, and it's hard to explain unless you've done like have you done a lot of music on your own or no? Or?
I wrote 4 songs with a friend of mine years ago, but I haven't released them yet.
Okay, well, there you go. Then at least you have some understanding of what I'm trying to say, that it's like we want some of these thematic underpinnings, not only as literary underpinnings, but we can use the music to do the same thing. So the music helps tell the story. And let's be honest, although this is difficult for people who are writers to really wrap their heads around, because again, books are read and you don't have music playing throughout them. Music is most, if not at least 50% or more of the experience that you recall when you think of your favorite whatever video game, movie, pop song, or whatever, for obvious reasons. And people might say, well, duh. And I'm like, no, but listen to me. Even without the lyrics, if a piece of music has lyrics, you might just be in love with just the tune itself, and the tune might carry the story in a way that you're like, even if I didn't know the lyrics, would I feel the emotions of the story? And the answer is usually yes. I'll give you a good example is the score to Chrono Trigger, which is a fantastic game on its own, but ignoring the game altogether, if people listen to Chrono Trigger's wonderful score, and people can go look that up if they're like, what the hell is Chrono Trigger? It's okay if they don't know. It's fine. But I mean, if they just listen to the score and do nothing else, absolutely nothing else, no need for them to find out about it, they will be moved by the passion in the development of the music. So that's, Chris, that's basically where I'm going with it. And in time, people will be able to hear more of the music from Diamond Dragons. I'm actually just about to work with this one other composer who I wanted to work with for many years. I won't mention his name right now because I don't know if we'll actually go forward with it. But I've been trying to work with him for some years, and he's just been busy, a lot of stuff going on, and these things take time. But I did just create with in conjunction with another composer a piece for my Oceanic Dragons, which I wanted that piece to be otherworldly and completely separate and divided from the main Diamond Dragons theme. So that was a pleasure to get that, and I wanted that underwater feeling, as well as it being real majestic and like magical. So that was a lot of fun, and that's basically it's called the Meaji's theme, because the Meaji, which is hard to explain what the hell's a Meaji, is basically oceanic dragons.
So, how do you decide which scenes or characters to illustrate, and what's your process for creating or adapting these visuals?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. I appreciate you asking that one too. When I'm writing, if I get to a point where I'm like, man, I'm gonna describe this, obviously, but it would be so much more powerful if they can see this thing. That's the general stuff. You can think of it like if I'm on a diving board, that's my diving off point. But then
Mm.
there's sometimes where I get surprised myself, where I'll just be working, I'll be doing some, the scene is long past, long past, long past. And I don't even know what I'm doing. I might even be half asleep. And I'll be like, oh my God, oh my God, I need an image of the crossbows with this thing. And oh my God, what the is wrong with me? Why did I not do that? And that might be like 4 chapters ago. That I finished all that some time ago. I haven't really thought about those chapters in a while. Maybe I did a little editing here or there, but I haven't thought about them. So I'll go back. So that can happen. And then there's other times where it's like a bookmark one. Like I have one right now. There's a character. I don't want to reveal her name now. I guess I could. It doesn't really matter. But in Diamond Dragons 5, there's a crazy new character, just stratospheric, insane in terms of like what the character represents. And I've been working with my illustrator and saying, hey, we want to take about 6 months to a year on this one. Like take your bloody time, you know. So, and she just got back to me some things, and we went back and forth. We had like an hour-long meeting and stuff, video stream, and I'm like, I like where this is going, but yeah, we can there's this idea. So I'm like, I trust your judgment, but keep going on these things. I'm like, on these other things, I might say, okay, I don't think we want to pursue that one. I don't think that's the thing. But I always try to give, whether I'm doing the illustration or if I'm doing it with someone else, I want to involve all the details that, like, even if you don't see them, they're there. And that's a kind of ironic. It's one of the lines from Starsha, who is an oceanic dragon in Diamond Dragons 1. She says, just because you do not see something doesn't mean it isn't there. So I like having these hidden underpinnings, not only throughout the words that I'm writing, not only through the covers, no joke, there's a lot of hidden stuff right here in front of our faces, but in the illustrations, there's a lot of hidden uh, symbolism and sometimes callbacks. And you won't necessarily know that, not until someone became familiar enough with the work so that they could go, wait a minute. Then maybe they're in Diamond Dragons 4 and they throw that book down, go back to 1, and they flip through and they're like, oh, goddamn, I can't believe it. It was there under my nose the whole time. I totally thought that he was pulling, like, wait, he didn't say anything about, and then they go back and see correlations, these purposeful, deliberate things that I've done. But again, Chris, I feel like it's like you're like a composer and a orchestrator. I want to figure out times, Chris, where I want you to know what's coming. I want other times where you need to do a little digging to know what's coming. You got to be, smarter. And then other times where I'm like, you'd have to be really intelligent and pay the hell attention, like really receptive and perceptive to know. And then other ones where I'm like, nope, you ain't allowed to know this one until I want you to know it. And then when it hits, you'll be like, oh my God, wow. And I'm, kind of pleased to say, and I don't want to get, necessarily too emotional or whatever, but some of these things, like the emails I've gotten, they're like, oh, Matthew, when this one scene hit, it reminded me of my grandfather and da 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 da, and he's
Wow.
da da da. And the other times they're like, Matthew, when you killed this one, how dare you? And they were not really mad, but they were like, I was like nervous inside, and I'm like, wow, like, right, people, they're getting hit hard in the emotional cortex, and I feel that's important. Like, what good is it if Lord of the Rings doesn't have that moment, right, where Frodo and Sam are at the volcano, they're trying to climb over, right, and he's like, I can't, Sam. He just collapses. He says, well, I can't carry it for you, but I can't carry you. And I will take a tissue now. You're just like, these are the moments that we all long for. We want some emotional, PowerPoints here and there to hit us. And also sometimes you got to get gut punched. You got to have a character. Like, I joke with some people sometimes, maybe I shouldn't be joking, but I'm like, there are a lot of Boromirs in Diamond Dragons 1. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, they're not all of them make it.
Well, I know you have Diamond Dragons 5 is in progress as of April. Is it already up and running now, or is it still in process of being?
No, I'm about, as of the moment of this recording, I'm about 121,000 words into it, and I want to say 65 illustrations, if I'm not mistaken.
So what factors will influence your decision to pursue these, and what themes might they explore?
The first poetry that you read, or the first lines that you read in book 1, other than the cover and then its tagline, when you flip it open, you know, whatever, then you see just a poem, a 6-line poem. And the first line is, before I start, I must see my end. So what the hell does that mean? And some people might think, well, this is just a fancy poem that he wants us to read. He wants to make it sound things. I'm like, well, to a point, it's a poem. It's somewhat ominous. It's obviously poetic, being a poem, but it also has a connection and underpinnings throughout the whole series. I won't go into all of that, but what does it mean, before I start, I must see my end? To me, it's all about, you got to know what is your goal before you begin on some kind of trek. It's kind of like, you know, when you're playing football, you know where the end zone is. You know what you need to do with the ball. You just got to get it there. That's the hard part. The journey is the difficult part. But what if you were playing football, and first of all, none of the lines were painted. Second of all, none of y'all were taught what the hell you're supposed to do with the ball. You don't know what the hell you're doing. So you're just running around with this ball in all sorts of different directions, going left and right and up and down and this way and that way and back and forth. And people go, eventually someone's going to say, what the hell are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? It doesn't even make any sense. And they're like, oh yeah, we forgot to set a goal. So if I don't have an end for Diamond Dragon 7, I probably am not going to write it. And if I don't have an end for 8, I'm probably not going to write that. And also, I don't know if I want to do a 7 if I don't have an end for an 8. Do you understand where I'm getting at now?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of quasi maybe have beginnings and ends for 7 and 8, but they're not strong enough at this point in the game plan for me to go, absolutely, this is happening. Oh my God, these are strong ideas. They're powerful and they really work. I don't want to be that person just going, oh, I just keep writing books because I don't want to stop. And my characters, I need to keep them alive forever. You're like, ooh, that's a terrible way to do storytelling. Like, that's when you start seeing the sequelitis problem, you know, where you're like, oh God, please, not another, you know, whatever name 8, you know, or 9, you know. I don't work that way. I look at it like, if I have a competent, good, smart, and also different story, then I'm going to do that. Diamond Dragons 1 and 2, they're not the same story. You know, not even 3 is. You know, 4 has this cool curve around where all the first 3 boil into 4. And again, that was by design. Almost back in the, like, all the way to 2021 is when I was like, ooh, I know what I want to do for the end of 4. And I even posted a video about it so people can go check if they need to. But I mean, yeah, 5 and 6, they kind of surprised me, but at the same time, I'm like, that would be interesting. I think I can do this. Like, I can get away with this. This will be smart. Let's do it. And then after that, I'm like, I don't want to make any promises until maybe I'm either closer to being done with either 5 or into 6. And then I'll be like, I think I know what I want to do with 7 and 8, but we'll see. I don't know. It would be smart for me to do it as 8, though. And there's a reason for that, which I won't go to.
Are you telling me that if I wanted to do book 1 of Maya as an android with her pet squirrel, I have to think of the ending towards it as well, where it's supposed to go?
I'm not telling you anything, only because, right, we're all individuals, Chris, and we have, I'll quote my own book again. The tagline to book 1 is, time is the only resource for which no creature may bargain. And we all have our own time on what we want to do, what we don't want to do, what we're going to try to accomplish, what we're going to see, whatever. But I always look at it like this. It's like, if you don't have a game plan, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? Kind of makes sense when you really think of it that way. Same thing, by the way, for characters. I see, for example, on forums, often people will post these things. Hey guys, I've been writing and da 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 da. It's like, I don't want to say this is the same old story, but I'll hear this a lot. They'll say basically this, but I'm lost now. My characters are wandering and I'm not really sure. And they're kind of going off. And I'm just, some things are kind of fun and exciting, but I'm just not. And I'm like, do you know your end? And they'll be like, wait, what? And I'm like, do you know the general ending to your story? And they'll be like, well, of course I don't. What the hell? Who do you think you are? How dare you attack me? And I'm like, I'm not attacking you. I'm just asking you, do you know the ending of your story? And they're like, I don't. And I'm like, well, you might consider that idea. And then I'll share this one last thing on it. And then, you can ask whatever else you want, because I don't want to hang on this, because it's only one way to approach writing. There's I don't want to say an old book, but a book that I encountered in the 90s when I was studying theater and Shakespeare's, scripts and screenplays and theatrical, whatever, Oedipus Rex and, Aristophanes, these lots of different things, Aristophanes scripts and stuff. Anyway, and the book was called Backwards and Forwards by David Ball. But yeah, I had it in the 90s. It does what the cover says. It's asking you to look from the back, the end of your story, and then say, well, what got you to that last scene? And then it required this scene. Well, how the hell did we get to that scene? And okay, let's go a little back. And how did we get? And he's like, if you do that, he says, you don't have to be anal about it and be like, I'm going to write everything backwards. But he's like, it's probably helpful if you know what is the impetus that makes your characters go to the next level. Why do they go upstairs and instead of staying where they are? Why do they go to Turkey?
Yeah, actually, some movies, the scenes are shot out of like the person I can't do in the movie. Okay, so we'll shoot your scenes first,
I would say that's different, Chris, but I mean, I know what you're saying is it's true that some films, they not only shoot out of order, but sometimes they're not even done with the damn script. They don't even know. And I think, by the way, that can be a disaster when they don't have the script. The shooting out of order is expected. You shoot all the New York scenes when you're in New York, even if you say, well, don't we begin in New York, in the mid, he flies back there to see Chelsea, but then at the end, we're back in New York and all is well. And like, well, we're going to shoot them beginning, middle, and end all at once. They're like, aren't we gonna have to cut Ethan Hawke's hair or whatever? And you're like, oh right, okay, we'll wig him for one. Like, you got a plan. But anyway, that aside, all that David Ball was saying with Backwards and Forwards was to think, what's the impetus, Chris? How did you get to work? Oh, well, obviously you drove there, but why did you drive there? You did this thing. How did you get? Oh, you used your car. Where was your car before that? So the point, and it's not so banal as that. It has to do with, if you get forced into a situation, they hold a gun to your head and they say, Chris, we have your wife in a warehouse. If you ever want to see her again, you're going to do exactly what we say. So then it's like, how do we get to this ending? So I always feel that if you know the ending, and I don't mean you got to be perfect in like every single detail, I'm just saying is if you know the general ending, the scenes you're going to be writing are going to hopefully keep gravitating right on towards that eventual end that you really desire.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast and looking forward to seeing more of your work. I really love your covers and everything. So any last words of advice to up-and-coming writers and actors, or maybe one piece of advice for everyone there?
Well, first I'll just say thanks for having me aboard. I always love doing these kinds of things, and it's a great pleasure and a blessing to speak with other creators and artists about storytelling in general, because isn't that what we kind of all aspire towards? So yeah, my advice is you better care. You only have so many hours remaining until it's over. And I'm not necessarily trying to be dramatic about it, like you're gonna die. We all are. But I even just mean like, if you don't start working on the project that you love the most, or projects, plural, when the hell are you gonna do it? Like, what are you waiting for? Christmas? So it's like, you better get on it.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Being on the podcast. Thank you so much, Matthew. And okay, everyone, everything will be linked down below. And we're going to end the stream right there, Matthew. Thank you, everyone.